All right, so I'm going to briefly go through some tips for kind of building your resume. I thought it was really important to put this around storytelling just a little bit because this is our experience, our lives, our callings, all on a piece of paper. And so we have to know how to actually weave together this story to help people understand the work we've done, but also the work we would like to do. So this is building a resume that speaks. So for the brief time that we're together, this is kind of what we're going to cover. So why a resume matters. We're going to cover what are some key resume components, formatting for your resume. We're going to kind of talk about action verbs and impact statements, just the very beginning of that. I really get in the weeds of more of this with one-on-one appointments. But this is just kind of the 30,000 foot view. And then we're going to talk about some mistakes that you kind of need to try to avoid when crafting your resume. And then, of course, if you got questions or anything of that nature, I'll show you how to get in contact with me, schedule an appointment with me, and then we'll be done. All right, so the first thing I want to briefly talk about is why does a resume matter? One, this is really your brand. So this is who you are on a piece of paper, right? So it really needs to reflect the work you've done, the value you've contributed to various spaces. And that cannot just be workspaces. So here at Candler, if you're in contextual education, that will be something that needs to go in your resume. So you can be in internship spaces or ministry spaces. So you can add all these different experiences on your resume. The second thing is usually your first impression to whoever is hiring for a position, unless you know the person personally or things of that nature. It really is important that you present yourself well for your resume. And so this is the first impression. Second, again, storytelling is very important. How do you start to tell your story of your experiences, your skills, and the contributions that you've made in different spaces? So that's why we say the resume is very important. All right, so here's some basics. One, most people struggle because they're like, I can't really put everything on one page. As graduate students, you can do 1.5 pages. I just wouldn't go past that unless we're starting to enter into CV territory, then that's fine. You can have as many pages as you need. For the font, you want to make sure that it's Times Roman or Arial, 11 or 12 point font. One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen thus far at Candler is sometimes students are trying to list everything, and because it's so much, they'll make the font really small. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that whoever's looking at your resume can actually see it. So that's important. The third thing is what Candler students don't do that well is humble brag. Candler students do incredible work, different things. Some of them are already in doing active ministry, doing active nonprofit work, doing active entrepreneurial things. This is the time for you to brag on that, right? And I know that that's hard, usually for us as seminarians, but we have to learn to really tell about the work that we're doing, the impact that we've made. The last thing I will say is your target market is very important. Get comfortable with that you're going to have several different versions of your resume. So there should be kind of one main template where you kind of list everything. And then from there, be able to start creating other resumes based off of the positions that you are applying for. So it's really important that you know who your target market is when you're crafting a resume. So if you, let's say if you wanted to apply for jobs in higher ed and also apply for jobs at a church, those are going to look two totally different ways. So you're going to have 2 different resumes for that. So just be prepared for that. You'll have multiple versions of your resume. All right, so I'm going to break down kind of what's important to add to the resume, what it should look like. All right, so the first thing is, of course, your name. If you have a nickname, so say, for instance, your name is Elizabeth, but you like to be called Liz, that's what you would put as far as your nickname. If it is like a family playful nickname, do not put that on your resume. So if your family calls you Ladybug, That's awesome, but do not put that on your resume. So it's really to kind of shorten. So a lot of times if men are named William, they might like to be called Bill. That's fine. You will put that on your resume. You want to make sure you have an email address and a phone number. For your email address, just make sure it's professional. For some of you, you may still use your Emory, but I would say as you get into your last year, make sure you change that probably to a Gmail, just so it's easier to assess because you may not have access to your Emory email. I think you may have access maybe 6 months after. So you may want to think about a Gmail account with your name, just make sure it's professional. And then last but not least, this is optional, but you can put your LinkedIn account or a website URL. So if you have a website that displays some of the work you've done, that would be a good place to put it on your resume. So some people ask, does it matter if you put education at the top of your resume at the bottom? It doesn't really matter to me. It's really up to you. I would say probably students who are coming right out of undergrad, going into graduate, and they have not had a lot of work experience, I would have your education first. But for people who are more established in their careers, it's fine if it goes last. So you want to make sure you're putting your university and school information in descending order. So the most recent thing first. Do not put your high school information on there. We know you went to high school. You are in graduate school at this point. So we know you either got a high school diploma or got your GED. So you don't have to put that down. The next thing you want to list is the program that you're in. So if you're a dual degree student, if you're a Master of Divinity student, if you're a THM, you really go ahead and list that out. And make sure over to the right, and we do have this as a template, so I can send that, for your city and your expected graduation date. For the optional highlights, I'm not the biggest fan, unless it depends on what you're applying for. I'm not the biggest fan of GPAs being on resumes unless it's for something specific. So like say for instance, it was for a scholarship that you're applying for and you needed to submit in a resume. Absolutely, you would put your GPA on that. However, I don't think that that's the big focus per se when it comes to jobs. I would focus more on the thesis work that I've done, and also maybe any key leadership roles that you had here at Candler or wherever whatever you did in your undergraduate as well. So I think that to me kind of should be the focus just so it can align a little bit more with what you're applying for. And just saying that, so for example, if you were going to apply for an organization that may focus on climate change. If you had a thesis or a major paper or a big portion of your research work while you're here at Candler was around climate justice, that would be something to highlight, right? So people know you actually have researched this, you studied it, all of those things. When you move to your experience, again, you want to go in for the most recent thing you've done to the least recent. Of course, you'll put the employer's name, you'll put the job title, you'll put where you did this and the time frame that you did it. The biggest piece that we really need to focus on is the duties and accomplishments that you'll list. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail a little bit later to kind of explain kind of what that should be structured like. But the biggest piece I'll say here is you don't have to put every job you worked. Like, so for example, in high school, if you worked at McDonald's, that's not something you would have to put on your resume. You really only want to focus on positions that you've done that align with the job that you're applying for. So like I say, one resume is going to look this way, another resume is going to look another. That's fine. The other piece I will say too is you don't want this to be too long. So I would say list no more than 3 to 5 duties and accomplishments. And I'll explain more about impact statements and what that should be structured like as you're listing that. Last piece, any leadership things you've done, activities you've done. So again, really think about a lot of the work you've done, even if it wasn't paid. if it's volunteer, but it displays leadership, or how creative you are, or whatever you're trying to display, you can list that on your resume. Some additional information. So if you speak other languages, if you have other critical importance skills, so like Photoshop or, you know, Microsoft Office as a whole and all the things, that's fine. Interest is really up to you if you want to put that on your resume. I would say maybe more for ministry jobs that I think that would align a little bit more, to just kind of hear what your interests are outside of working, outside of having to give pastoral care. For more nonprofit corporate spaces, it's kind of irrelevant. They may ask it in an interview, but most times that's not really the concern. So I really leave that up to the student. If you want to put the interest there, you can, but that's not something you necessarily have to do. All right, so we're going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds, to just kind of talk about some builder tools. We kind of know what the basic format and structure of the resume should look like. So this is what you can utilize to kind of help structure that even more. Something I highly, highly recommend for seminary students. When you're leaving us, especially if you're going into non-church jobs, sometimes we have to make it make sense for the people that are hiring us. My goal is to help you all understand the skills that you're gaining from your seminary degree, that translate to other things and other spaces and other industries. And so you need to be able to articulate what you're trying to do. So a resume summary is a short description of your qualifications that explain why you're a good fit for the role, and can include like your achievements, experiences, and educations and skills. And you can kind of see the example on the screen. So a person could be, say, analytically driven maintenance mechanic with 5+ years of experience focusing on intricacies of equipment and instrumentation, right? So there's kind of it's a snapshot basically in sentence form of what your experience is, right? An objective, however, is a brief statement that communicates your career goals, such as the type of job or industry you want to work in or skills you want to build. So, for example, it could be theological student with over 4 years of research experience in the realm of social justice and climate change, is seeking a position at a nonprofit to do community engagement work. All right, so you stated kind of who you are and what kind of your experience is, but then you just told me what you're looking for. I highly recommend usually the summary. It really kind of depends on the job. But for many of you all, it's the summary. And so they understand the skills that you already have, and what you can contribute. If you know exactly what type of industry or rather, yeah, what type of industry you really want to enter, so nonprofit spaces, government spaces, ministry spaces, you can do the resume objective because you know exactly where you're trying to go. For some students who don't really know exactly which industry they're trying to get into, the resume summary to me makes a little bit more sense. So it's up to you. If you emphatically know where you're trying to head, objective makes sense. If you're not all the way sure, but you want to display this is the experience I have and the expertise I have, I would say the resume summary will probably be the best fit. The biggest piece to your resume will be the experience and what you are listing up under that. So you want to use strong action words to describe what you've accomplished. So for example, lead, develop, coordinate, facilitate, manage, mentor, right? Those are action words. You want to be sure to place action words in the past tense if it is a former position. That's another error I see most times on resumes. If you no longer work there, make sure you put it in the past tense. If you currently work there, it goes in the present tense for action words. So here are kind of some examples of what action words are, okay? So like administered, appointed, approved, and you kind of see these have different categories, right? Another tool to utilize to kind of help you come up with some action words, you can use ChatGPT to kind of help you. So how do I say this better? Don't be afraid to kind of lean into technology there to kind of help you make a sentence more concise. So as you are putting the action words, that it makes sense. And I'm about to explain that in a few minutes, but you want to make sure that you're putting action words to the things that you did. All right, so this is where impact statements come from. You have to focus on your outcomes and your contributions, but you need to be specific in the way that not only what you did, but what you contributed, right? So for example, led a youth group of 25 students, increasing weekly attendance by 20% over 6 months. That's very specific. There's an outcome to it, as opposed to just saying, led a youth group of 25 students, right? You gave me detail of what you contributed. So the duty was you had to lead a youth group of 25 students. But what your contribution is that you increased the weekly attendance by 20% over 6 months. Another example is coordinated a community outreach project that served 100 plus families with essential resources. That sounds a whole lot better than coordinated a community outreach project. So the duty is there, but what did you contribute? What was the outcome? So that's really important as you think about what you're listing as your job opportunities. You're really thinking about the outcomes and the contributions. So as you're doing that, that's how you're going to compact those bullet points that go up under each position. So what did I contribute to this space? What was the outcome? Don't just list what you did, right? So yeah, that's cool to say you led a youth group of 25. You want to be very specific there. So here's some common mistakes that you need to avoid. Do not overload with information. That's why I say have about 3 to 5 bullet points. That's why concise language is really important. Don't use passive or generic language. That's what I was just saying. You need to be a little bit more detailed. Again, we're telling our story. So you wouldn't just say, I went to the store. You would say, I went to Kroger to go grocery shopping to find fruit, meat, right? You'll be more specific. So think about, if I'm telling a story, I need to offer some details, right? Don't include things that are irrelevant or outdated. So again, it goes back to that example I said, if you worked at McDonald's in high school, that's outdated information. We don't need that on the resume. The other is be sure to review if you have any typos or grammatical errors. There are plenty of systems that will check it for you to make sure there aren't any grammar issues or typos. It'll catch it for you. So heavily utilize that. And don't overly complex or make this busy formatting. You don't want to do too much with the resume, especially if you are trying to apply for non-church jobs. And even when you are applying for church jobs, you don't want your resume and the formatting, and not just the formatting, but the design to be so busy that it's distracting and we can't really get to the information. You want to be as clear as possible with how you have your resume formatted. And I'll show you a template of what is the most common way to present your resume. And it's kind of been proven that this is the more preferred way because it's just a lot easier to read. All right, so here's an example. I created these two. This is a student I made up. So this is Alex. On the left is a more creative way of kind of saying who Alex is, right? But to me, this is not a resume. I would call it more like a marketing profile, or like if you went to a networking event and you wanted to hand out something, this would be a cool way to catch people's attention. If you notice here, there's a QR code. If you do something like this, I think it's important that you have a QR code that leads to a resume that looks like the one on the right. Okay. So you can be creative. if you want to, but that shouldn't be what your main resume is. I would use it more to get, somebody's attention. Even if, let's say, even if you took this to like a networking event, right? There's still a way for them to see a more fleshed out version of all the work you've done. So this is something to the left. I created it, and it's to me, I would just call it a marketing profile. Like, this is kind of a snapshot of who I am, and what I've contributed. On the right is a formal resume, and this version of a resume is most times the preferred, because it's very clear. You can see it. It's formatted in a way that makes reading what you've done a lot easier. But it's okay to have, I would say, two of these. But again, if you do the more creative thing, I would have a QR code that links to a more fleshed out resume. Okay, so we kind of went over the 30,000 foot view today of kind of why resumes matter, how you need to format it, the components of it, the action words you need to utilize, and some mistakes to avoid. I'm here to help you one-on-one, to help you try to figure out, what this needs to look like for you personally. So we can look at, if let's say you want to apply for a specific job, we can look at the job description, look at what you have for your resume, and try to make them sync up as much as possible. So I give a lot more hands-on assistance via appointments. So to the left, you will see the different things that I can help you with, but also that QR code with my picture on it has a link to the rest of our events for the semester for career services. And I don't know if you can see it. See if I can move this way. I don't know, that way. um, that has all of the events that we have coming up for the remainder of the semester. And then, of course, to the right is my Calendly. So that is the best way. You have to book time with me. If, let's say, you don't see a date that works for your schedule, just reach out to me, and I can see if we can try to figure out a good time for us to meet. There also is my email. You can also scan the information there, and it'll take you right to my Calendly for you to book time with me. There is no limit on how often you meet with me. Some students meet with me once, some students meet with me maybe 4 times. I've had some students meet with me as much as 10 times. So whatever you feel comfortable with, and how that really depends on the assistance that you need. I'm here to support you in whatever way possible. I'm going to stop sharing. Stop the recording.